our current undergraduate students at the Institute in Paris. So today we'll be hearing from 3 of our students. We've got Jessica, Oscar, and Nancy, and they will be speaking to their experience of studying at the Institute in Paris, as well as offering some helpful tips and advice for any prospective students who are looking to attend the university. We'll be posing some questions to them, some common FAQs, and they'll be answering those. And in addition to that, at the end of the session, you'll also be able to ask them questions as well. So we can't hear you and we can't see you, but if you do want to ask us questions, you'll need to do this through the chat function. So in the top right-hand corner in the blue bar, you'll see something that looks like the messenger icon. If you click on that, you'll be able to pose questions there and they'll come through directly to me. Okay, and as well as the students, we've got Mallow on the line who represents our student services team. So Mallow will be able to help out with any questions that the students can't answer. Okay, so I think we will kick off now. So just as I said, introducing today's speakers, you can see our 3 lovely students and Mallow, our student services officer. So we've got a range of student representatives here from first year, second year, and third year, as well as some different minor options as well. So what I'm going to do first is ask the students to tell us a bit about themselves. So Nancy, would you mind going first and just telling the audience a bit about who you are?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Nancy. I'm a 3rd year student doing French with IP. I don't know if I need to say any more than that, but yeah.
Where do you come from, Nancy?
Oh, I'm from Somerset in England. That's where my parents live, but I grew up in the Middle East.
Great, thank you. And Oscar, you next, please.
Hi, I'm Oscar. I study French with business. I'm from Cumbria in the northwest of England. Yeah.
And Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica or Jessie. I study French with international politics and I'm from Devon in the southwest.
Great. And why did the 3 of you decide to study at the Institute in Paris? We'll go in reverse order, so Jessie first.
So I was already living in Paris. I did a year as an au pair living here. And I knew I wanted to stay in the city. But I really liked the idea of being able to do an English degree whilst also living here. And I really liked the fact that ULIP is a very small uni. I think for me that was a good factor. Yeah, and then I did all the open days and the webinars, and everyone seemed really nice.
Thank you. And Oscar?
I did French at A level, really enjoyed it, and I came to the applicants visit day. It was, I think, the 2nd time I had ever been to Paris. The only other time was, I think, when I was younger and I went to Disneyland. But yeah, I really enjoyed visiting Paris. It was really great. And I knew that I wanted to do French, and kind of the only viable option to do it in France would be through ULIP. So yeah, that's why I chose to come to ULIP.
Thanks, Oscar.
And for me, it was my French teacher at college. She had a student go to ULIP actually like 2 years before. And so she gave us the brochure for it. And I saw it and I thought, I have to do this. Like, I have to take this opportunity, and I want to go live in Paris and I want to learn French and really like engage in the culture.
And Nancy, how did you find the application process? Because a lot of our students are going through that at the moment. I'm sure it's pretty daunting.
Yeah, I don't fully remember it because it was a while ago, because I also had a gap year. So I did deferred entry. But I remember it was just through UCAS, pretty much like the same as everywhere else, I think. Just I wrote a personal statement. And then we had an interview with I had Louise Lyle, who did my interview. And it was just very simple questions. She asked a few questions in French, I think, because I do French. But it was very simple, easy French. And it was just more of like a conversation with her. Yeah.
Perfect. And Jessie and Oscar, do either of you have anything to add to
that? Mine was very similar to Nancy. I also did a gap year, so mine was deferred. It was all pretty straightforward. yeah, I had an interview as well, which was kind of, yeah, it was quite daunting at the time, but they're very welcoming with it. But yeah, apart from that, nothing else to add.
Jessie?
No, pretty much the same.
Great. And I know it was top of mind for a lot of students considering Paris is just the idea of moving abroad can be quite daunting, especially, I mean, all three of you didn't go directly from school, so maybe you had a bit more experience out in the world beforehand. But maybe starting with you, Oscar, how hard was it to move abroad for your studies?
Yeah, it's definitely a big shift. I did a gap year, so I had the experience of kind of traveling alone, going to new places by myself. But yeah, it's definitely a shift. It's not kind of, if you've forgotten something, you can just nip back home. It's very much like, oh, I'm moving to a different country. So it is kind of, you kind of put in at the deep end, and you have to work out a lot of things for yourself. But I think it was something that really helped me progress with independence and things like that. But yeah, it's quite daunting at points.
And Nancy, I know you also had a gap year beforehand, but did you have the same experience? Like, what were the main challenges you faced?
Yeah, I think on like the personal level, it's a bit difficult, but in a way, you're all thrown in it together. So that was a really easy way to make friends. You're all feeling a bit homesick, and like you find your group. But I found like the visa application, that was hard. That was difficult for me. And like you have to actually be on top of that and get it done quite well in advance.
Do you remember how far in advance you had it done?
I did not have it done in advance. I had it done at Christmas. So I stayed for 90 days, and then I went home. Like as soon as we finished, I went home because they take your passport off you, so it's a bit difficult. So, but it was fine. I managed to do it over the Christmas break.
Okay, well, good to know there are last minute options available. And Jessie, you were already in Paris, so I don't know if you have anything to add to this one.
No, I would say that it takes some adjusting. Like when you first move here, I remember having to like actually speak French all the time. It like really physically exhausted me, and I know a lot of other people have found that as well. But also I know a lot of people, like when we first moved out here, we moved out quite a bit before uni actually started, so you have that time to like adjust and kind of get used to the difference in your life. Yeah, so it was okay. It wasn't like you had all this change and you started uni at exactly the same time.
Thank you. Another one that I know a lot of our students will be interested to know is just how you found the living costs in Paris. So obviously, for a lot of you, for a lot of students, it'll be the first time living out of home, and you're also living in quite an expensive capital city. How have the three of you found that? Maybe I'll start with you, Oscar.
Yeah, it's quite an adjustment. It can be very expensive in points, especially with things like rent. That's kind of the biggest expense that you'll be having. But then, I mean, there are some things that you can find that can be quite cheap compared to places. If you're coming, I mean, for me, coming from the north of England, it's quite different. But if you come from somewhere like London, it will kind of be feeling quite similar, I think. One thing that I found is quite nicely priced is kind of going out. Alcohol, going to bars isn't too bad, things like that. But yeah, as I did a gap year, I kind of brought quite a bit extra with me from work I'd done over the year, and that really helped me with the first year. And then kind of going back home and doing work over summer and stuff, it is kind of something to take into consideration of how much more you're bringing to uni compared to if you're going to uni in the UK, because it is slightly more expensive. But yeah, it's worth it.
Great. And Jessie?
Yeah, I think there's certain ways that you can get around it in a way. Like I know several people who are doing kind of au pair situations where obviously you live in, so that solves the rent issue. But also like I live privately. I just have my own little studio, and once you're here you can apply for something called CAF, which comes from the French government, and that helps you towards your rent every month. So there are things that, you know, are in place to help you. And ULIP, you know, the student services will email you and explain all of that as well. So it's not as bad as, I remember being really daunted by that when I first arrived, but it's okay. It's doable.
Thanks. Nancy?
Yeah, kind of like what everyone said. I think it's a similar price to London. I've never lived in London, but I think it's a similar price. And it can be expensive. And I think like going out for dinner I think that's something that most of the time is expensive, but you're quite easily able to avoid doing that. But the rent is expensive. But again, with CAF, it's helpful.
Perfect. Thank you. And maybe I will go to you next, Nancy, for this one. Kind of a fun one after all the heaviness of what's the hardest thing and how expensive is it? But what is the best thing about studying in Paris?
I think the fact that it is Paris, and that sounds ridiculous, but I'll be walking along the street and, you know, there's people here, tourists here, and these people are coming for like a once in a lifetime trip. This is a big, amazing trip. And you live here. This is where you get to call home. And it's such a beautiful city. And I just think you learn it like you appreciate it and you're able to learn about it on such a deeper level when you actually live here and you can fully like embrace all of it. So I think it's great.
Very true. And Jessie, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, when you're a French student, I think Paris is pretty much the best place to live. And also, if you do politics as well, the uni itself is really well placed. Like, we're right next to the Assemblée Nationale, so the French Parliament building. So it's really cool because I remember when the French Prime Minister resigned and we were literally in our politics lecture and we're like next door to the building. It kind of puts it all in perspective, which is pretty cool when you're learning about it and you're there at the same time.
And Oscar, what's your favorite thing?
Yeah, they've covered a lot of the amazing things. It is just kind of, you walk out your front door and you are like, wow, I am actually in Paris. And it's so interesting to get to know a city from a different cultural perspective. I think that's my favorite thing. All the culture that surrounds Paris, the music, the food, the museums, the art. It's kind of, there's so much that when you come and visit, you kind of see the sights, but there's so much more to Paris than just kind of the Eiffel Tower. And you get to really know the city really well.
And this sort of ties into what some of you have touched on already. So Oscar, you mentioned that you work from home in the summer break, so you work back in the UK. And Nancy, I vaguely recall you were an au pair of some description. So maybe I'll go to you just to speak to how you've sort of managed to make extra money while studying as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm an au pair for a family that live like 20 minutes away from me. I got it through a former student of ULIP. And there's lots of like posters and things around ULIP of jobs you can start. But yeah, I do au pairing and I do it 1 week every evening and then 1 week not at all. And so it's like 2 weeks of the month and it's really well paid and it's cash in hand. There's no like troubles with paying taxes and things.
And do you find that you can balance that with your workload?
Yes, definitely. And I think with au pairing and like this type of au pairing I do, it's quite often like taking children to a club, and so I can sit while they're doing that, doing my own work. But also it's just the evenings, and our uni timetable is quite open and quite free, which is really good because it means that you're able to work a lot more on your own.
Yeah, great. And Jessie and Oscar, do you want to add anything to that, or do you feel like we've covered it?
I work as a TEFL teacher, so I did my TEFL teaching English as a foreign language qualification during my gap year, and I think that's quite a good option because people always want native speakers to teach their kids English. So, like Nancy was saying, there's always like job adverts for English teachers in the uni, and it's also quite good because I just kind of do it take on as many students as I want, depending on how much time I have around my studies. So I'd say that's quite a good option as well.
Cool. And Oscar, do you find the working from back from the UK in your summer breaks, is that going to get you by? Like, is that working for you?
Yeah, so when I'm working in my summer breaks, it would kind of be, I'll be working all the time, well, mostly all the time during summer. But then the job that I do have over summer also allows me to do some online work. So kind of if 1 week's getting kind of quite expensive or anything, I can do kind of 5 hours here, 5 hours there, something just online to get a bit of extra cash. So things like online teaching English as a foreign language, babysitting. There's a lot of people that I know that do stuff like that, and it's really good to have kind of a flexible hours during uni. Really, really useful.
Great. Sounds like you've got an excellent setup there. And you sort of touched on this, so maybe I won't go to all of you for this one, but Jessie, I think you raised it. But what is it like to study at a small university? Because obviously the institute is on the smaller side compared to some of the universities in London. But how have you found that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the person. It's definitely not for everybody. Like, I'll say that from the get-go. Like, I like the fact that everybody kind of knows each other, not only in your year group, also your lecturers, and everybody knows you well. It's very different. It is something you have to consider because, like, for example, we don't have big societies. Like, we have societies, but we don't have big societies like other unis have, or like university gyms, all of that. We're a tiny building. But I really like that kind of close-knit community, and you always know someone when you're there, which is really nice.
And Nancy, how do you think it impacts study? Like, can you sort of speak to the proximity to your lecturers and what you get as like a smaller class?
I absolutely love it. Like, so I came from a very rural town in Somerset. My classes have always been really small, and I think I did languages for my A levels, so again, classes were really small. And then coming here, it was so lovely that the seminars, there's normally about 10 people in them. Like, it's really tight knit, and you're able to go and have meetings with any lecturer you want pretty much any time. And you've got like a personal tutor that you can go to. It's much friendlier, and like your lecturers know who you are and they know your names within like the first week, which is amazing and impressive.
Great. And maybe Oscar, I'll start with you. What was your first year accommodation and where are you living now?
So in my first year, I chose one of the outlined kind of, I had 3 options of where I could live that were presented to the ULIP students by the student services. ULIP's got a relationship with these 3 accommodations. And I chose to live in Ivry-sur-Seine, which was one of the 3. And it was kind of a really nice way to go about it, because it wasn't something, when I was kind of thinking about moving here, it was something that was really quite daunting, and it is still quite daunting kind of looking for places in Paris, especially because the system of kind of 30 days before like things come on and they're wanting you to move in quite soon. So it was nice to have something set up from around May time, June time, through the uni. You're paying it to the University of London rather than to a French landlord. So it is kind of, it's a really nice system to have in place for the first year, because there's a lot of things that are new, a lot of things that are going on. So it's really nice to have that. Although I'd say that if I was to do it now, even though that it's really nice to have that, I think it's also a really great option to try and find people before at open days through the applicants group chat and things, who are wanting to move in. I've got a group of friends who from the first term live together kind of right next to the Louvre in this lovely apartment, all 3 of them. And it's kind of a really great way to get to know Paris like firsthand, because a lot of the student accommodations can be a bit further out or be slightly more cut off because you're in a studio. But apart from that, like, it's really helpful to have it in that sort of setup. And this year I'm now living in a flat share with 2 other people that I met at ULIP last year. We're in the 20th arrondissement, which is just next to the cemetery Père Lachaise, which is, I think, the biggest metropolitan cemetery in Europe, and it's an amazing place. Great, like, very interesting to walk around, and the area is lovely. It feels like you are in Paris, but you aren't in a touristy part of Paris, so it feels like you really get to know what real Paris is like living here. So yeah, that's where I'm living now.
Living like a local. That sounds amazing. Nancy, where are you living at the moment?
I live with somebody I met at ULIP. I live in a lovely apartment in the 8th, literally 1 street behind the Champs-Elysees. Very lucky to have found it. It's an amazing apartment. We've got a little balcony. It's really sweet.
Amazing. So there clearly are opportunities, and I know there's a bit of a reputation for the Paris housing market to be quite competitive, but it sounds like if you're sort of willing to share or work hard at finding a place, you can find stuff, which is good. And then I'll go to each of you. Maybe we'll start with you, Nancy. What are your plans for after you graduate? Where are you hoping this degree will take you?
So when I first started, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. But I think I'm going to go and do a master's at, hopefully, the University of Warwick in journalism. So I'll do, well, it's journalism and international relations. So the first year is international relations at Warwick, and then the second year is at Monash University in Melbourne.
Oh, I'm from Melbourne. Yeah, definitely go to Melbourne. It's great.
Okay, well, that's what I want to do. So yeah.
And you, Jessie, what are you thinking? I know you're only in your first year, so sorry to put this on you, but
I can't lie. I'm like Nancy was saying, I do not know yet. So
fair. I feel like that's why you do an undergrad, to figure it out. And Oscar, are you any further along in making your mind up?
I think I'm a bit between the two. Like, I'm still not 100% sure, but I think as kind of the degree goes on, you get to find out what you really enjoy about the French subject or about business. So I think I'd quite like to combine the French part and the business part, maybe work for a company that is working internationally with both French and English as languages.
That sounds like a great way to combine your minor and your degree program. And now on the subject of your programs, obviously you're all doing French studies, but I would like to hear just how your minor options are different and how you found the courses so far. So maybe Jessie, if I'll start with you.
Yeah, so my minor is international politics. So when you do a minor, at least in first year, you have 4 modules in total, and one of them is the minor subject that you pick. And for international politics, you're in the same lecture as the people who just study international politics. I found it really interesting. I think I'd say it's probably the hardest module for me, just because there's a lot of information to take in. But I'd also say it's the most interesting. So yeah, that's all I can say really.
Great. And Oscar, you touched on your business minor, but how have you found taking that alongside French studies, and how have you found the sort of tutorial structure and class structures?
Yeah, it's really interesting to do business alongside French, particularly in ULIP. You kind of get the experience of business in a more international or European context. It's kind of business as the minor. It means that it's not as in depth as it would be as a major, but you get an overview of all the different things. So far I've done things about economics, about European business in international business context, and marketing as well. so it works really well with the French and kind of gives you a broad view of how, because we do, so with the French course, we also do pick up some politics modules, and it really works well with politics modules and how that kind of translates into the world of business as well. It's interesting.
Great, thanks, Oscar. And Nancy, I think you're also doing international relations, is that correct?
Yeah, so I do French with international relations.
Yeah, why did you choose that minor and how have you found it?
I chose it because, as I said, like I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to do French, and so that was how I picked that. And I thought politics, that'll be something that I find that is something I find interesting, and I thought that I would learn and expand my brain a bit, and I absolutely love it, and that's why I want to go on to do it as a master's. I find that, I think, the most interesting of my things, but again, because I do French as my major, I'm able to pick a lot more modules than students that just do international relations. Like international relations with French, they have less choice because they have certain things they have to do. And I think you have to do a dissertation if you do that. Whereas if you do French, it's optional. And so I chose not to do it. I chose to do modules instead.
Right, thank you. And in your experience, and also just speaking anecdotally, what student services are available and have you used any of them? I'll go to you first, Nancy.
I don't know 100%, but I know there's a lot of help with pretty much anything. Like anytime you have a problem, you can go into student services and just, like, I've been in there once and say, can I have a plaster? Like, they're so helpful about everything. And like, so if it's IT, you can go in there. And I know there's also some mental health support available. Yeah.
Cool. And Jesse and Oscar, anything else? Will that sort of cover it?
Just kind of, they're really helpful in student services, and then potentially for things that you don't want to ask student services about, there are also advice from the Students' Union. We've got like an office upstairs where student services are, so where Marlo is, but then downstairs there's the Students' Union where they'll have office hours where you can go and ask any questions. That's really helpful as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Anything to add, Jesse?
No, I mean, they do everything. I'm always in there forgetting passwords and things, and they reset them for you straight away. Or yeah, you can pop in whenever, and they're always there to help.
Right. Stocked up on passwords and plasters. That's what we like to hear. And I know you sort of touched on with the smaller campus, there not being like the larger societies available that you might get at a bigger institution. But obviously there are some societies and clubs available. So I'm hoping each of you can speak to your experience. I know most of them are kind of first year, like sort of orientation week and stuff like that. But maybe Nancy, if I could go to you, like what is your experience of what's on offer?
There's a lot on offer. And it's quite easy to start up your own society. So if you don't find something that you like, then you can start it yourself. And I definitely did a lot more in first and second year than I do now. But like with work along the side, it's a bit difficult to do that. But like the freshers weeks are really well planned and really well organized, and they're really fun to go to learn about different things and different things that are available for you.
Great, thank you. And Oscar?
There's like actually really surprising amount of societies. I think when I first came, I thought that was going to be quite a big drawback because I do a lot of sports, especially climbing. So I was really surprised to actually turn up and find out that there actually is kind of there's a climbing society, and there's pretty much any society that you kind of want to go and do. It's a great way to meet new people. For example, this year, some of my friends have set up a cinema society. So you kind of go to lots of different cinemas around Paris, go watch French films, go and kind of hear from speakers and stuff. But it's also just a really great way to meet people that you otherwise wouldn't talk to, really. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. I'm sold. And Jesse, have you dabbled with any of the societies or clubs?
Yeah, I mean, Freshers Week, you literally have all of the societies in the lecture theatre, and it is very manic. You can just go around and sign yourself up for all sorts of things. But one thing I wanted to say was there's some societies, I know Model UN do it, where they do almost like a joint thing with the American University in Paris, which is AUP, which is nice because A, you meet new people, and B, it makes them a bit bigger. There's, for things like Model UN, obviously you need more people. So we use, we kind of make the most of what we've got around us to make it work.
Great. And then do you have any other advice that you sort of haven't brought up yet, or anything that you think would be beneficial for students considering studying at the Institute in Paris? So maybe put yourselves back to when you were applying. What would you have loved to have known then? And maybe Oscar, I'll start with you.
I think my main recommendation is just kind of make sure that you like the city. Try and come visit at least once before kind of deciding to come here. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult because it's not somewhere you can just hop on the train to, unless you're in London. But it's just kind of something that it's not a campus university. It's very much in the centre of Paris. You can walk to the Eiffel Tower in about 15 minutes. It is very much kind of you're just put right into the centre of Paris. So it'd be very useful to make sure that you do like the city. And it's a city that's potentially not for everyone, but if you do like it, you really love it.
Great advice. Thank you. And Jessie, what about you?
Yeah, I would say the main things that I considered was the fact that it's not really like a conventional uni. You know, it is smaller. It is one single building. But if that is for you, then I'd say definitely go for it. I mean, the city is amazing. And also, I wanted to say, like, the quality of the teaching and the staff and the pastoral support as well is really, you know, it's top level. And I think even at a level that you wouldn't necessarily get that in a uni, just because in a big uni, because everybody knows each other and they know who you are, and they you know, you build relationships with them.
Amazing, thanks. And Nancy, what about you?
I think I would say don't be daunted about your level of French. Like, I know that after my gap year, I didn't remember a single thing, and it wasn't a problem. You come in, you get taught everything again, you've got really good grammar lessons. And also, if you don't speak French and you're not interested in doing the French side of the course, that's also fine. I've got a friend who doesn't speak a word of French, has been here for 2 years, doesn't speak a word of French. And she gets by, she's fine with that. And she doesn't feel lonely, I don't think, she doesn't speak French. It might be a minor setback, but because we're at an English uni, you'll still make lots of friends. And so don't be daunted by the language.
Great advice, thank you. So now we have time for audience questions. So we have a couple in the chat now, but if anyone else has any they want to add, please post them. You can see the chat icon in the top right-hand corner next to the blue bar. And then I will ask them to the students. So let me just get back to my screen. Where have I gone? Someone has asked about, I guess, a bit more specifics around the format of classes, like how, I think you've raised how big they are, but how many do you have per week, and do you have tutorials? So maybe if we answer, like, do you have tutorials and how many classes do you have a week? Nancy, if you don't mind taking that question.
I think you have, it depends on what you do, but I think you have 11 hours, or maybe you have slightly less than that, of teaching a week. And so that can be in lots of different formats. So depending on your modules, whatever. And so, like, for the bigger things like international relations, you have a lecture. And I say the bigger, there's still only like 40 people in the lecture theatre, but you have that. And then you have a seminar at another point, either with the same lecturer or with a different one, about the stuff that you've done that week. Or I think I don't know if this, I didn't have this in first year, but second and third year, you have joint lecture seminar, which is slightly bigger classes, but it's like the two of them together. So it's more of like an interactive, you go through the material together and you're more like chatty about it.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. And Oscar, maybe this one for you. Do you think your French has improved significantly, and how confident do you feel compared to your A-levels?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely improved significantly. I do think it is. It can be at points quite challenging to push a French, especially because it's quite easy to kind of fall into the trap of having just friends from uni. When, because it's an English uni, you are going to be speaking English with your friends at uni 90% of the time. So it is really important to kind of do stuff outside of uni, whether that's sport. For example, I do a lot of climbing, and I've met loads of friends from climbing, and I'll go climbing with them 3-4 times a week and be consistently speaking French to them for kind of 2, 3, 4 hours, and it doesn't feel like I'm really kind of struggling too much. And if it is, then a lot of the time they're really, really helpful and kind of slow down, say something again. But it does feel like my French has really come on, especially since kind of pushing myself to go and find French friends. Yeah.
Great. And Mallow, I think this is maybe one for you, but we've got someone here who's asking, they have a place for September, but they're on their gap year at the moment, so won't be able to come to the offer day in Paris. Is that going to be a problem?
It's not a problem. That's completely fine, because if you defer, then you would be invited to the next year's offer holder day, if that makes sense. So don't worry too much about it. And if you have any questions that pop up whilst you're on gap year, you know how to reach us. Just send us an email. That's completely fine.
And if a student couldn't attend the offer holder day at all, would that be an issue? Would they just be able to sort of come to you later for questions?
Yeah, that's completely fine. There is nothing to worry about it.
Great. Thank you. Maybe one for you, Nancy. Have you felt lonely at all being in the big city by yourself?
I don't think so. I don't think I've felt like lonelier than I would have felt in another place. I think in a way it's quite easy to find things to do here. And so if you are feeling lonely, especially like in first year, I lived in the same place that Oscar lived in. And we all lived together. And so you go knock on your neighbour's door if you're feeling a bit lonely, and you all know each other. We all lived on the same floor, and it was quite like nice. And we'd all just sit in the corridors and chat. And for me, I can ring my family. I don't think that I feel lonely being in a city. No.
Yeah. Sounds like the small classes help as well, or like they're sort of intimate setting rather than getting lost in a big campus.
Definitely.
And Jessie, this is quite a specific one, but what is the best way to budget for the metro? Do you have any tips as a local Parisian?
Sorry, was it budget for the metro?
Well, what do you use? How do you pay for the metro? How expensive is it?
Yeah, okay. So the system is called Navigo, which is sort of like an Oyster card in London, but you pay annually, is normally the cheapest way. And it's really not that expensive for students. I think mine's 300 something euros a year, which is really pretty good. And that includes all of the metros, all of the buses, all of the RERs, which are the trains that go a bit further out, all in the Paris region. So yeah, that's not an issue.
Yeah, much cheaper than London, to be honest. Maybe one for Mallow. How many people are in the university, and do you get student finance allowance as a London student would? Do you know that?
So for the number of students, I think at the moment we have 220 students, like first year, second year, third years. Every year we have like 70-ish first year students joining. But for the student finance question, I'm not too sure, so I will need to check. So I cannot answer that now.
So for the student who asked that, I think it was Jane, you can submit a query via the contact and they'll come back to you with a specific answer on that one. Then May has asked, like, how far in advance should you sort your housing out? So should you have your housing sorted prior to receiving your A-level results? I don't know if who's done, Jess, you the most recent, like how far in advance did you sort out your housing?
Yeah, so personally, I wasn't in this situation because I was already in France, but I know people in my year who sorted it out, I would say around the time that you finish your A-levels, kind of begin looking and sorting it out. Again, it depends what type of housing you go for, but yeah, I would say beginning of the summer, unless you're going privately, which is a whole other story because it's complicated and they tend to do it kind of a few weeks in advance. But I know even people who came to ULIP through clearing, so they didn't find out they were coming here until results day, and they still managed to get places in the student accommodation. So I think it's not particularly stressful, like you have to do it at a certain time.
Mallow, do you have anything to add there? Can you sort of guide students if they are struggling to find housing?
So basically, for first years sort of offer holders, we send them a form around May, June, around this period to present the accommodations offers. So from there, they put like their top choices, and then it's in August that they receive the allocation. So technically, it's possible to kind of sort your housing around June, May, June when you complete that form. But also there is nothing wrong for you to look privately in Paris, but you need to be really aware that because Paris is a big city, you need to be really wary of scams. And because if you do not speak French or can understand French really well, you're more likely to be scammed. So what we say to students, if they have concern about getting scammed, if they have the contract or things like that, any documents in French they have a doubt on, they can just ask student services and we'll have a look at the document and kind of read if it's like a legitimate house, and also any questions about is this rent amount normal for that area of the city, like anything like that, any question, come to student services.
Great, thank you. And Oscar, did you do anything to prepare for your interview? Do you have any advice for students?
I can't really remember because I think it was about 2-3 years ago now. But I think the thing was there was going to be kind of some questions on why you kind of wanted to move there, what were you wanting to get out of going to uni in Paris, and just some general questions about yourself, about your A-levels, things like that. It wasn't too in-depth, and it really wasn't too... It was quite something that was quite daunting when I was preparing for it, but you kind of get to the interview, and I had mine with Louise, the same as Nancy, and she was really welcoming, and it really wasn't quite as scary as it first seemed. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
I think the thing Louise would say about it is, as much as we wanted to know that you're the right fit to come to the Institute in Paris, we want you to know that the Institute in Paris is the right fit for you as well. So that interview is as much about making sure like you understand where you're coming, what you're doing, but making sure that like that feels right for you. So don't stress about it too much. As long as you're like interested in coming, enthusiastic, and you've met the criteria for application, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Also treat it as an opportunity to try and find out if this is the right decision for you too. I also have a question, maybe Mallow, let me know if you can answer this. If not, maybe one of the students can try. But when do you recommend students apply for their visa? Is for the 1st of September start? When would you recommend that they start applying?
Oh, that's quite difficult because every situation is very different. Some people, for example, it's like as soon as they have their offer, they're like, okay, how do I start? So we send out all this sort of relevant information, like the step-by-steps and everything, once we confirm the offer. But basically, you'll find to do your own research about how to apply for your student visa in France, but you have to go through 2 platforms and you need to have like a document from us. So basically, you can't start applying for a French visa before we confirm that you are officially a student with us. But I think the student have a more authentic experience of like what it is like to apply for a student visa. So I will let you guys speak.
I mean, I think it sounds like you've covered it sort of as like the point you can start applying is when you have been accepted. Jessie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Nancy mentioned it, but when you apply for your visa and you go to the visa place, you don't have your passport until they issue a visa. So just make sure that you're, like, obviously if you've planned holidays or whatever in the summer, you can't leave the country whilst you're waiting for your visa to come through.
That's very good advice.
And make sure that you have enough time left on your passport for your visa. I had to get a new passport as well. It was very chaotic. So just make sure that you've got enough time on your passport.
That sounds so stressful.
The biggest recommendation I would have potentially is that if you have any family or kind of grandparents, anything that have an EU passport, I think it makes it a whole lot easier. I've got a few friends that have Irish relatives and managed to get an Irish passport, and kind of the application becomes from so much to nothing. So that would be kind of the best way to go about it if you can. Unfortunately, I can't, but if you can, that's great.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a European passport. There's a specific question here about students applying from Pakistan. So there's different admission requirements for based on, I guess, your A-level equivalent, so what your high schooling was. So to this particular student, I would say go through our contact us form on our website, because you'll need to just check your specific case. But yeah, absolutely, as long as you meet the specific requirements, that's all good. Strong recommend there, though, to reach out directly through the contact us and stress test your exact situation. There's a question here about a degree in international politics. So if you take that degree, do you still have an opportunity to improve your French, particularly your French writing skills, even though the French is not part of the course curriculum? So obviously all of you have studied French studies, but do you know from any of your friends who study international politics? Jessie, I saw you put your hand up.
Yeah, so I know that even if you just study international politics, even without a minor in French, you can take French courses that don't non-credit courses, basically. So you have the chance to improve your French, but you don't get tested on it, which is nice.
Great, thank you. Mallow, did you put your hand up as well, or did I imagine that?
Yes, it was just to talk about the non-credit classes. So
Yeah.
just like Jessica mentioned, so these classes are designed for students who have no prior knowledge of French. So you'll start as an absolute beginner and start from there. So there is no problem at all. So, and you won't be graded. So that's an advantage.
Great. And we have a student here asking, they're an Irish citizen. Do they have to apply for a student visa? My understanding is no. No, because you have the ability to live and work and study in Europe as an Irish citizen. Yeah, you're all good. Where am I? There's one here that says, this is sort of specifically about fee assistance. This person says that they're a French national, would they be able to get fee support from the French government? I think that's sort of like case by case. Mala, do you have any insight into like if you're a French national, if you get any additional support?
So I'm not too sure about how we would work, but I think the first thing that comes to my mind is to speak to your bank and to see what sort of prêt étudiant you could get from them. I think the government has a thing called like a prêt étudiant guaranteed by the state. So you might as well check on the French government website. So that's what I would think.
Okay.
Your first way to go. Does that all make sense? I hope it does. But if you have any questions, just drop an email to contact in the contact form and we'll respond to it.
And then Catherine asks, if I've applied for a French studies minor, but I already speak French, is there a possibility to change minors within the first few weeks? It's a bit of a confusing one because that's the only minor associated with international politics. But I think more broadly, if you could speak to changing minors, like can you sort of switch? Is there an opportunity to change?
Yeah, so that's completely possible. We did have a couple of students sort of going to a couple of French class and realizing, oh, maybe that's not for me, or things like that. So if you, for example, applied for international politics with French and you want to drop the French part within the first week of teaching, that's completely possible.
Great, thank you. Sorry, the scroll has just gone a bit funny. Let me get to the next one. What level of French is required, and what is the split of French and English like? Obviously, it would differ between international politics and French, but I would say like the international politics is English. But if you could speak to how you're taught in French studies, maybe Nancy, like how heavy is it all in French? Do you have components in English? How does it work?
Well, quite a lot of it is choice based, like so you can pick modules in French if you want to do them. That French tends to be quite easy French, especially in first year. It's quite understandable and you follow it very clearly. Then you have a compulsory 2-hour lesson of grammar in first and second year. And you have 1 hour, I think, of speaking a week as well. I think that's all that you have in first and second year. And then third year, maybe, I don't know, third year you have translation instead, or as well as you have translation both ways. And then you have 1 hour of grammar, but it's formatted slightly differently. And then you have an hour of oral as well.
Okay, thank you. There's a question here which I don't completely understand, but I think what the student is asking, because the student says, if I study at a university in France, will I be able to obtain the French degree equivalent? But this is a University of London. So the institute is part of the University of London, so you get a University of London degree. And then they say, should I choose to continue my studies to pursue employment in France? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that question. If you don't mind just resubmitting it. Sorry if I've misunderstood that one.
So from what I understand from that question is, if you get that UK degree, would you be able to work in France, or would my employer recognize that qualification? This depends on employers in a way that they might ask you to provide like a statement of like comparability. That's a document that you can get from like an organization called NARIC. It's NARIC. So that's a document that would assess your equivalency of your UK degree to a French sort of equivalent. So if that's the question, I hope I answered it.
Yeah.
But, if you feel like I haven't answered it correctly, feel free to drop a message in the contact form and we'll have a look at it.
And then another question around the French minor. So if the university determines that my French proficiency is quite strong, are you able to pursue the French minor as part of the international politics degree, even if you don't have an A-level French, but you meet all the other UCAS point requirements? Do you know the answer to that, Mallow? I think that's an admissions question.
I'm sorry, I was a bit confused by the question.
Can you take the French study minor if you don't have the like A-level French, but you do have French proficiency?
Okay, so I think French proficiency is like a very broad term because some people are raised completely bilingual. They have really good like listening and speaking skills, but sometimes the writing or the reading comprehension might not be at the same level. So that's a very specific question. So I think if you were admitted into ULIP and without any A-level French, but decide, oh, I would like to join, then that's a conversation that you would have with the French language teachers and see from there. But from an admissions point of view, if you want to do any course that has French in the title, then you need a qualification in French.
Okay, thanks, Mello. A couple of people have asked about the recording of this presentation, and yes, we will have a recording that we'll download and send to you early next week. It'll also be available online, so you can go back and have a look if you've missed anything. I think I have got all the questions. Oh, there's another one here that's just come through. Where or how do I find group chats to join for students starting this September? Does anything exist yet, Mello, or is that something that happens later?
I'm not too sure about it, so I will have to check this later. So please,
all students know.
There's a Facebook prospective students account which is run by the SU, and I think that's what everyone else is talking about. But that's where pretty much everyone is. And then I think my year we had a Snapchat group chat, but I wasn't in it, and it didn't really affect much.
Yeah, I think, like Nancy said, that something gets created by the SU, and then a lot of the time from that you kind of find out that there's then a group chat on something, and then you'll get there, and it won't really matter anyway if there is a group chat or not. I remember that I was in the group chat for my year in August and then joined in September. But then there were people that joined and weren't in the group chat or anything, and it kind of doesn't matter because once you're there, you meet people in person, and it feels fine anyway. So, but there are opportunities to meet people online beforehand.
I've posted what I believe is the Facebook page for the ULIP SU, so hopefully you'll be able to find some more information and connect with students that way. Then there's another question that's come through. In the international relations course, is there an opportunity to study literature texts in certain modules? I don't know if any of you can answer that. I'm not really sure, but I think because none of you guys do that specific course. Mello?
I think so. In second and third, you'll get to choose elective modules, so you get to kind of customize your degrees. So basically, you would have a couple of modules that are taught in French where you would study sort of specific topics. I think this year we did have like a literature one, but again, like these modules can change year on year. So at the moment, we can't really make a strict guarantee that that module will be there when you join.
Great, thank you. And Oscar?
I know for French, if you've got French as your major, then there are quite a lot of opportunities to study literature. It is mostly in French. So last year, at the beginning of first year, we studied Voltaire, and then this year we've studied, in the past term, we studied 5 or 6 different books. But I'm not too sure that if you're wanting to do French as a minor, I don't think you can choose that. Is that right, Marlo? I'm not too sure.
I'm not too sure either about giving a strict answer now because things can change from year on year. So what someone studied in second year might be different from someone who studied second year like 3 years later, if that makes sense.
But I guess the sort of key takeaway is there are opportunity to choose electives that align with your interests. So if that is your interest, there's a hope that one of the electives would be able to tick that box for you. I would say that's the key one.
Yeah.
So we have quite a few more questions. We're running out of time. So I'm just going to pick a couple more. This one is speaking to the ULIP relationship with the Queen Mary University of London. There's quite a lot of information on our website about that. So it's not specifically part of, but it has a relationship with Queen Mary. So I would say if you want to know more about that, just check out our website. There's a section that says about the University of London, Queen Mary. Otherwise, chuck us a question. And then there's a question about the, I might actually have to, sorry, Rayan, there's a question about the ENIC, NARIC, and how long that takes to translate degrees, but we're not going to have time to answer that now. So sorry if I didn't get your question, but unfortunately this system cuts off exactly at 6 p.m. So I did just want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining. We really, really appreciate your time. If we didn't get your question, please just drop us a line via our contact us form that I've linked to at the beginning. You can also find it on our website. And thank you so much to all our student ambassadors for taking time out of your day to speak to the experience. I know it's something that we all would have benefited from during our application journey. So really appreciate it. And thank you to Mello for representing